Hello everybody, Darko with Poly API here, and today I wanted to do a demo of our upcoming support for GraphQL within Poly. This will be available in our beta 2, which is coming out shortly. So with GraphQL, the real power of it is that you get to express to the server exactly what you want it to return. So you get to define the exact object model that you want, so you can select the attributes from the response model. You get to do queries that span multiple resources. You could do multiple queries that assemble. So you have a lot of power to really express yourself. Now, with Poly, there's kind of two paths to it, and both are perfectly valid. And so for our first incarnation of GraphQL support, what we're really doing is actually allowing you to instantiate kind of rigid functions off of GraphQL API calls. Now, some might feel like that actually constrains and reduces the power of GraphQL, which I think that there is some validity to be said for that, but it also simplifies it. It also makes it so you can instantiate multiple different Poly functions off of the same GraphQL endpoint. So you get, kind of much easier to use simpler functions. Now, in the future, I do also see an opportunity for us to add support for kind of a more generic GraphQL call, where you still get the full expression of what you want. So today I'll be showcasing just that first, the simplification portion, and then I'm sure in a future video I'll come around and close the story, complete the story with GraphQL by adding something much more generic, flexible, that allows you to take the kind of the full advantage of GraphQL if you're comfortable with it. So I'll do two different functions today. One that's just going to be a query, one that's just going to be a mutation. For this video, I'm assuming that you're at least somewhat familiar with GraphQL and have a basic understanding of how to use it. And then I'll just use Shopify just as a generic API that supports GraphQL, and I would say quite well. So the first one here is a GraphQL query. And a couple things to note is that the endpoint is always going to be the same with GraphQL. So with the headers, with the URLs, it pretty much works just like training on REST. You get to define what attributes you want to be variables, and then those are actually going to be expected as arguments to the Poly functions. Now with the body, it's a little bit different. So with the body, you get to declare the actual variables within GraphQL queries themselves. So you don't use Postman variables to kind of denote what you want and what you don't want to be variables. So you actually express them just using GraphQL, and then those variables will be interpreted by Poly and turned into function arguments. And I'll showcase that here in a second. So this is a simple query which gives you the ability to make a call and retrieve some product data. And in my case, I'm just going to be retrieving the ID, the title, the vendor, and the created at time. And then I also include an option to include the variants. So the ID and the display name of each of the variants. And you'll notice that for my variables, I said I also support count, and I've made count required. So you have to tell me how many products you want. I could have, initialized it to some base value and made it optional, right? So you have a lot of flexibility here. Don't take what I'm doing as a recommendation of what to do. Take it as just an example of what you could do. And then with the variants, I initialize it to false, but then I actually express my variables to set it to true. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow the AI to see, what the request looks like, but it will also allow it to see, the full response model when it's set to true. So here there's a little bit of nuance when you're training Poly. You have to just be careful to always represent kind of the widest possibility. But then at the same time, you'll notice that you have the ability to initialize it to different values if you'd like. So here we are, and then I also have this variable real quick where I'm just not using this one. So the point of this one is to just showcase that it doesn't matter. You can have your GraphQL variables be more so a set, and then you can use different ones within the actual queries to determine if they should be used and expected or not. Now, one of the additional thing I'd like to point out is that kind of the uniqueness conditions for training Poly, like when Poly decides whether it should be the same function or a new function, that varies based on the combination of variables and then the combination of queries and their aliases. So again, I know that's a little bit of a more advanced GraphQL concept, but basically, we do take an opinion on what should be a new function and what shouldn't. And then through our Postman script, you always have the ability to basically force it to be a retrain of a specific function or force it to train it as a new function. So you have full control. And so I won't dig too much into that nuance, but if you do end up training a lot of GraphQL functions and want to learn more, feel free to reach out to us. So let's go ahead and actually fire this off. And we can see that the call to Shopify worked okay. And then we should see a call to Poly here in a second. Okay, and we can see that Poly has learned this function as well, and we got a 201 for it. Now, let's go ahead and do a mutation. Same exact idea, except in this case, it actually goes ahead and creates a product. So in my case here, we're just gonna go ahead and create a product where we provide a title, a description, and a type. So I'll call it demo apparel, best shirt in town, type is apparel. We'll go ahead and hit send, and same idea. We should see it succeed with Shopify, and then we should see it succeed with Poly here in just a second. Okay, great. So we could see a 201 from Poly. Now, if I go and look inside Poly to see what functions we have, I'll go ahead and refresh this view. We'll see that we have a couple here. So one is query with variants, and that's something the AI named it, and it gave it the description saying, hey, specific number of products from Shopify to include the variants, option to include the variants. The response includes product ID. So like a really good description, honestly, of what this thing is. And then same idea, create with GraphQL. Okay, maybe not the best title because my consumers won't they won't care how it's being created, right? And it's again, they don't have any power of GraphQL here, so it's a little bit misleading to introduce the word GraphQL. But again, you have the ability to tweak these, change them. So I'm going to leave it as is. It's good enough for the purpose of this demo. So now let's go ahead and switch to VS Code. And here I'm going to go ahead and regenerate my client library. And then in parallel, I'm actually going to go ahead and write a question. Now we have a lot of functions on how to get products, and so I've done a lot of training with this particular, resource within Shopify. But I'll go ahead and say something a little bit more leading. So let's say, how do I query a number of products in Shopify? So hopefully we'll see it identify the GraphQL function, and then for create, again, the AI is kind of doing its job. If we have multiple functions that work on the create, it's going to pick the one that is most appropriate. So, we'll see what my query comes back with, or my question to it comes back with. But in parallel, we'll see that we now have within Shopify, under products, we have create with GraphQL, that's one of them, and then query with variants. And so that's there. Here we can also see that it did find the right one, so I think the word query helped it identify the right one. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste it, and let's take a look and see what we got here, how close it is. So first thing is, let me close this guy and make this a little bit bigger. So it's expecting a shop and a shop token, so I'll use this as an opportunity to showcase Vari. So for the shop, I'm just going to say Vari dot, let's include Vari too. Okay, so Vari dot Shopify dot shop domain dot inject, and then for the shop token, we'll do the same thing, and then here I'll do token dot inject, and the token is actually a model, so it's expecting a path. So I'm going to go ahead and give it, it's a model of an object, so I'm just going to say current. We want the current token, and then count and with variance true or false. Those are coming from from within our training, and you can see that it's set 10, which is fine. I'll just bump it down to 5, let's say. And then for variance, I'm going to say true because I'd like to see them. And then let's see where maybe there's a little bit of a bug here. Let's see what's going on here. So it's expecting a response dot, okay, so we have data dot products. Okay, so yeah, so we got the object model here. I don't know why it was complaining. I think it was complaining because data is optional, but it treated it as mandatory. So I'll have to wait and I'll have to dig into that. That feels like a little bit of a bug at this point, but that's okay. So we can see that we have edges, and then within the edges, we've got the nodes. And so this is the object model from Shopify. But for me, I'm just going to go ahead and print the full object. So I'll go ahead and print products. Yeah, let's go ahead and run it. So ts node demo.ts and see what we get back. Okay, great. So we got a set of objects coming back from Shopify. Again, we can introspect these and use them. Now, let me go ahead and just repurpose, or actually, you know what? I'll just say, how do I create a Shopify product? Yeah, let's see if it finds it just naturally instead of leading it on. Okay, so it did actually find it. So great. I'm going to go ahead and copy it. We're going to go ahead and replace this. And this guy's going to be asking for, a number of things. So again, we'll leverage Vari. I've done a separate video on Vari, so if this is new to you, please go take a look at that. Great. So we got shop token. So we'll inject both of those. And then for my product title, let's say this is a GQL demo. Description, that's fine. And then let's just say apparel is the type. And so yeah, so let's go ahead and inject our token here. So we'll do vari dot, or actually sorry, the shop domain dot inject. And since we're already here, these inject functions, what they do is they're actually an instruction to the Poly server to inject that server side. So nothing is passed from my client here. It's just basically a reference to a secret which is held in HashiCorp Vault on the Poly server, infrastructure. And then for the shop token, I'll just do the same thing: vari.shopify dot token dot inject the current. Okay, cool. And then again, same idea. I think this is a little bit of a bug. We'll have to investigate this, but we'll just make data optional, and then we could see that it's printing the new product ID. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Run it. It looks like it's created it successfully, which is great. It gives me a product path within Shopify. So that's pretty cool. I'm just going to go ahead and copy the ID so we can go find it in the UI. And let's go ahead and switch the Shopify UI where I can, refresh it. And I think we called it demo apparel, or no, we called it GraphQL demo, I think. There it is, GQL demo. And we can see that that's the product ID, 847. I'll just paste it. Yep, same exact ID. So hopefully you enjoyed this demo. Again, showcasing how GraphQL APIs could be used to train Poly to create more specific functions to make them easier to consume. And then, in the future, we'll go ahead and add something more generic where you can actually pass in your own queries so that these Poly functions are more versatile, but at the same time more complex. So both approaches are perfectly valid. This is just the first one we started with. So as always, if you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out, and we'd love to talk to you and see how Poly can help you. Thanks.